The ICU was already awake before the sun reached the windows. Monitors pulsed in steady rhythms. Ventilators whispered in timed breaths. Syringe pumps ticked with quiet precision. It was the kind of soundscape staff stopped hearing after their first month: constant, mechanical life. Morning shift change moved like a practiced ritual. Clipboards passed hands. Numbers were spoken softly. No one wasted words. At bed 7, the new nurse listened. She stood slightly apart from the cluster of night staff giving report, not excluded, not invited, just present. Her badge strip was gray, float pool. No department color. No unit loyalty. Temporary by design. Name? The charge nurse asked without looking up from her tablet. Layla. The charge nurse nodded once. No small talk. You're covering 7. Do not leave that room unless relieved. Layla followed her gaze. 2 armed men stood inside the glass-walled ICU bay. They were not hospital security. Their posture was wrong for that. Too still. Too deliberate. One faced the door. One faced the patient. Neither spoke. The patient lay sedated, intubated, motionless except for the slow mechanical rise of his chest. No family photos. No flowers. No chart visible from outside. Even the curtain track had been removed from the ceiling rail. Temporary installations always left marks. She noticed the screw impressions. "What's his case?" she asked. The night nurse shrugged. Above clearance. Contagion? No. Violence risk? No. Then why restraints? The night nurse hesitated, then lowered her voice. Orders. That was all. Layla nodded once. She did not ask again. Inside the room, one of the armed men shifted his stance half an inch. Not discomfort. Adjustment. He had been watching her reflection in the glass. She stepped in. The air inside felt different. Not colder. Tighter. She sanitized her hands. Checked the ventilator settings. Confirmed tidal volume. Verified infusion rates. Her movements were economical, almost spare, like someone accustomed to working in narrow spaces. She did not look directly at the guards. But she mapped them. Boot wear pattern. Right holster retention strap loosened from repeated draw drills. Sleeve creases indicating long transport before arrival. The faint smell of aircraft cabin air still trapped in fabric. They had not originated locally. She adjusted the patient's arterial line. Heart rate steady. Blood pressure supported but stable. Sedation level deep, but not medically necessary deep. That was deliberate. Any instability overnight? She asked. The guard facing the patient did not answer. The guard facing the door said, "Vital state acceptable." Acceptable. Not a medical term. She nodded as if it were. Outside, 2 nurses whispered near the medication cart. Why post rifles in an ICU? Federal case, I heard. Witness? Or suspect? Layla documented numbers without reacting. Her handwriting was small and precise. No loops. No flourishes. Every letter formed the same way each time. Routine calmed rooms. Rooms calmed people. She checked the 4 insertion site. No infiltration. Good. She checked the ventilator tubing angle. Slight torque. She corrected it. She checked the ceiling vent. Dust disturbed recently. She moved to the medication pump and silenced a near alarm before it sounded. The door guard watched her hands. Not casually. Professionally. She could feel it without looking. Has anyone relieved you since arrival? She asked quietly. No, he said. How long? A pause. Since transfer. Not an answer. A boundary. She inclined her head. Accepted the boundary. Logged the information anyway. Outside in the hall, a transport gurney rattled past. A phone rang twice at the nurse's station. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped when they remembered where they were. Normal hospital noise. Inside the room, stillness. She checked the patient's pupils with a penlight. Equal. Responsive. Not consistent with the sedation depth charted. Interesting. She turned the light off. The door guard's radio clicked softly. Not a voice. Just carrier signal. Someone testing a channel. His shoulder muscle tightened. Only for a second. Most people would not see it. Layla did. She adjusted the blanket over the patient's arm, smoothing it once, precisely, as if that small order mattered more than anything else in the room. Her tone stayed neutral. You should rotate stance every 15 minutes, she said. Muscle lock reduces response time. Silence. The guard facing the door studied her now, directly. Appreciate the advice, he said. She nodded. Not apology. Not challenge. Acknowledgement. She finished her checks and stepped back to the bedside monitor. Her eyes moved across the numbers once, slowly, committing them. Outside, the charge nurse called down the hall, "Float nurse settling in okay?" One of the staff replied, "She's quiet." Another said, "They always are first shift." Inside the glass room, the door guard spoke again, voice low. "You done?" "Yes." She did not leave. She rested one hand lightly on the bed rail. Watching. Listening. Waiting. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. But beneath it. Faint, irregular. A vibration traveled through the floor. Not mechanical. Not hospital equipment. Something heavier. Distant. Approaching. She did not move. The guards had not noticed it yet. The vibration stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Layla kept her hand on the bed rail for another 2 seconds after it disappeared, as if confirming its absence mattered as much as detecting it. Neither guard reacted. That told her more than the vibration itself. If they had expected it, they would have ignored it without tension. If they had not expected it, they would have checked. These men did neither. Their breathing did not change. Their eyes did not shift. Their stance did not reset. Which meant they had not felt it. She removed her hand from the rail. The ventilator exhaled softly. She adjusted the patient's pulse oximeter by a millimeter. Not because it needed adjustment. Because movement revealed attention. Stillness revealed thought. The door guard's radio clicked again. This time, a voice bled through, too faint to understand, but not encrypted static. Analog spill. Sloppy. His jaw tightened. "Your channel is open," she said quietly. He glanced down, then thumbed the device. The sound cut. He looked at her more carefully now. Not suspicious. Evaluating. "How'd you catch that?" he asked. "It changed your breathing." He held her gaze a moment longer than politeness required. Then he said nothing. Outside, the unit clerk rolled a chair past the glass wall. The wheels squeaked every third rotation. She made a note of the rhythm automatically. Patterns made disruptions obvious. Inside the room, she reviewed the 4-pump log. Infusion history showed a manual override at 5:12. She checked the chart. No entry. She scrolled back. Nothing. She did not react. "Who adjusted sedation at 05:12, she asked. Neither guard answered. She looked up, not at them, but between them. A neutral focal point. It prevented defensiveness. No entry in chart, she added. The guard near the patient said, medical staff handled that. I am medical staff. Silence. She nodded once. Logged the timestamp mentally. No confrontation. Information first. Questions later. She moved to the ventilator again. Settings unchanged. But the oxygen line coupling was misaligned by a fraction, tightened recently, not by hospital maintenance. The threading showed fresh scoring. She touched it lightly. Warm. Recently handled. Her eyes flicked to the guard's hands. No tool residue. No lubricant trace. So not them. Which meant someone else had entered this room after setup. Someone not recorded. Outside, a nurse laughed again at the station. The sound cut off quickly, replaced by the low murmur of a phone call. Ordinary noise. Safe noise. Layla adjusted the blanket edge again, smoothing it along the patient's shoulder. Has anyone accessed this room since your post began? She asked. No, said the door guard. The answer came too quickly. Not rehearsed. Protective. She inclined her head slightly. Understood. She checked the arterial line waveform. Clean. She traced the tubing path visually from insertion site to monitor port. No tampering. No air. No microbubbles. Her gaze shifted to the ceiling corner. The camera. Standard dome housing. Hospital issue. Angle slightly off centerline. Not enough for staff to notice. Enough for coverage gap near the medication counter. She looked back at the monitor as if nothing had changed. How long have you been awake? She asked the guard facing the door. He frowned faintly. Excuse me? Your blink interval slowed 30 seconds ago. He said nothing. Fatigue narrows peripheral detection, she continued, voice level. You should rotate. A beat passed. Then the other guard spoke quietly, not unkindly. We're fine, nurse. Not dismissal. But close. She nodded once. Yes, she said. For now. She stepped to the sink and washed her hands again, though she had not touched anything unclean. Water temperature, lukewarm. Pressure slightly reduced. Maintenance issue in the line. She filed it away automatically. When she shut the faucet off, the silence that followed felt thicker. The distant vibration did not return. But something else did. Footsteps in the corridor. Not hurried. Measured. Approaching the ICU double doors. Both guards heard that. Their posture changed at the same time. Shoulders squared. Weight shifted forward. Attention narrowed toward the hallway. Professional. Expected. But then. The footsteps stopped outside. No badge swipe. No knock. No entry. Just presence. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The guard by the door touched his radio again. Confirm corridor status, he said quietly. Static. He pressed harder. Confirm corridor. Nothing. Layla dried her hands with a paper towel. Folded it once. Twice. Placed it beside the sink. Her voice stayed calm. Your dispatch should have responded within 2 seconds. No answer from the radio. The guard's thumb pressed the transmit key again. Control, respond. Silence. Not static. Silence. Layla watched the heart monitor. The patient's rhythm had not changed. But her eyes shifted slightly, to the door handle. Still. Unmoved. She spoke, tone unchanged. "Your support channel is down." Neither guard replied. But both were listening now. Carefully. Outside in the hall, the footsteps resumed. Walking away. Slow. Unhurried. As if whoever had been there had learned what they needed. The guard near the patient murmured, almost to himself, "That's not protocol." Layla answered softly, "No." A beat passed. Then she added. "And neither is leaving a corridor unacknowledged." The room seemed to grow smaller. The monitors louder. The air tighter. Something had shifted. Not visibly. But decisively. The change did not arrive loudly. It arrived in the guard's breathing. Layla heard it before she saw anything else. A subtle compression in the inhale. A slight hold before the exhale. The kind of shift that happened when training met uncertainty and found no instructions waiting. The door guard pressed his radio again. "Control, respond." Silence. No static. No interference. Just absence. His thumb stayed on the transmit key half a second too long. The second guard turned his head, not toward the door, but toward his partner. A look passed between them. Brief. Professional. Wordless. Layla watched the patient's oxygen saturation remain steady at 98. Stable numbers were useful. They gave people something to believe in. Outside, the ICU corridor resumed its ordinary rhythm. A cart rolled past. Rubber soles crossed tile. A distant phone rang once, then stopped. Nothing in the hallway suggested threat. Which was the problem? The door guard lowered his radio slowly. "Dead channel," he said. Not to her. To the room. The other guard shifted his stance for the first time since she entered. His boot rotated slightly inward, a correction toward exit alignment rather than patient coverage. Layla spoke without turning. "Your perimeter changed." Neither man answered. But neither denied it. The radio clicked again. Both guards froze. A voice came through this time, compressed, low, urgent. Too distorted for words. But tone carried what language did not. The door guard's face drained of color. "What?" his partner said quietly. The radio voice sharpened, one short phrase, barely audible. Layla did not understand the words. She did not need to. The effect was immediate. The guard by the door took one step back. Not tactical. Instinctive. His partner's hand tightened on his rifle grip. "Repeat," he said into his radio. No response. Just a thin hiss of open channel. Layla's gaze shifted to their boots. Weight distribution forward. Heels ready to pivot. Leaving posture. She spoke gently, as if clarifying medication dosage. "If you withdraw, this patient loses controlled protection." The door guard didn't look at her. His voice was lower now. "We have to verify something." "What?" He didn't answer. The radio snapped again. Another burst of voice. This time longer. More urgent. The guard nearest the patient swore under his breath. It was the first unprofessional sound either of them had made. "What did they say?" his partner asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. Information he did not want spoken aloud. Finally he said, "Fallback check." The phrase sounded wrong even to him. Layla tilted her head slightly. "Fallback from what?" Neither man replied. The radio emitted a sharp tone. Not a hospital sound. Not a civilian frequency. A coded signal. Both guards reacted at once. Not confusion. Recognition. And fear. The door guard stepped backward again, toward the hallway. His partner followed half a step. They were no longer guarding the patient. They were orienting toward escape routes. Layla's voice remained level. You were not instructed to abandon post. The guard closest to the door shook his head once. Not denial. Refusal. We have to move. Why? No answer. The second guard's jaw flexed. He looked at the patient for a fraction of a second, long enough to register conflict. Then the radio crackled again. 3 sharp tones. Final. Decision made for them. The door guard turned fully toward the exit. That was the moment. Not when they ran. When they turned. Because turning meant they had already chosen. Layla's hand rested lightly against the bed rail again. Your chain of command did not authorize this, she said. The words were calm. Certain. The guard glanced at her, really looked this time. Something in her tone caught against his training. Ma'am, he said quietly, step away from the door. She did not move. Behind him, his partner said, we don't have time. The first guard hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then. They bolted. Not a tactical withdrawal. Not a controlled exit. They ran. Boots struck tile hard enough to echo. The door slammed against its stopper. Their footsteps pounded down the corridor, fast, uneven, urgent. Gone. The sound faded. The ICU fell silent. For a moment no one outside reacted. Nurses at the station stared after the fleeing men, confused, waiting for someone to explain what they had just seen. No one did. Inside the glass room, the ventilator exhaled softly. Layla watched the doorway they had abandoned. She counted. 1. 2. 3. No return. She stepped forward. Closed the door. Turned the lock. The click was quiet. Final. Outside, a nurse's voice drifted down the hall. Why did they run? No one answered. Inside the room, Layla adjusted the 4-line with steady fingers. Her breathing had not changed. Her pulse had not quickened. She looked at the patient once. Then at the empty space where armed authority had stood seconds ago. Her voice was barely above a whisper. All right, she said. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. Her hand moved to the wall panel beside the door. And the ICU, without announcement, without alarm, began to change. The first thing Layla did was not dramatic. She turned off the room lights. Darkness did not fall. The ICU never allowed that. Backup illumination along the floor and monitor glow kept the room visible in low, clinical gradients. Shapes remained clear. Shadows deepened. Reflections on the glass vanished. Visibility shifted from public to controlled. Outside in the corridor, someone said, "Why'd the lights change?" No one answered. Layla pressed the wall panel again. The glass door opacity tint engaged halfway, frosting the center band at eye level. Anyone standing outside could still see movement near the floor and ceiling, but not the patient's body, not her hands, not the equipment controls. Privacy mode. It was meant for dignity. It also functioned as cover. She stepped to the bedside monitor and lowered alarm volume to a narrow threshold, loud enough for her to hear, too soft to broadcast into the hall. Her movements were precise, unhurried, economical. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Outside, footsteps approached quickly. 2 nurses appeared at the glass. "Why did they leave?" one asked. Layla did not look up. "Step back from the door," she said. Her tone was calm. Not loud. Not urgent. Certain. They did not step back. They stared. She adjusted the ventilator tubing again, aligning the circuit so it could be disconnected in one motion if necessary. Her fingers checked the manual resuscitation bag hanging beneath the bed. Oxygen line attached. Valve functional. Please step back, she repeated. Something in the steadiness of her voice reached them. They exchanged a glance. Moved back. She pressed another button on the wall panel. The door access indicator shifted from green to amber. Restricted entry. The nurse outside frowned. You can't lock an ICU room. Layla spoke without turning. It is not locked. It is controlled. That distinction settled in the air. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse called out, "What's happening in 7?" Layla answered, still facing the patient. Temporary access limitation. For what reason? Security deviation. The charge nurse walked closer. What deviation? Layla lifted the patient's wrist slightly and checked capillary refill. Armed escorts abandoned post. Silence spread outward from the doorway like a ripple. What? Someone said. They left, Layla repeated. The charge nurse stared through the glass. Why would they? I do not know yet. The honesty was deliberate. It built credibility faster than certainty. The charge nurse stepped closer. Open the door. Layla's hand rested lightly on the bed rail. No. Not defiant. Final. The charge nurse blinked. Excuse me? If you enter now, Layla said, you change air pressure and sight lines. Please remain outside. That is not your decision. Layla finally looked at her. Her expression held no challenge. No emotion. Just assessment. It is the correct one. The charge nurse opened her mouth. And stopped. Because the tone was not argumentative. It was procedural. Like hearing a pilot state altitude. Around them, other staff had begun to gather. Confusion traveled quickly in hospitals. So did fear, when no one named it. One of the younger nurses whispered, "Should we call security?" Layla answered before anyone else could. Yes. They all looked at her. Call hospital security, she continued calmly. Report armed detail departure. Request corridor sweep. Do not mention patient status over open line. The charge nurse frowned. Why not? Because we do not yet know who is listening. Silence again. Not resistance this time. Calculation. The charge nurse turned slowly toward the desk. Call it in, she said. The younger nurse reached for the phone. Inside the room, Layla adjusted the sedation infusion rate by half a unit. Not enough to change vitals. Enough to delay spontaneous movement if stimulation occurred. Her eyes moved once to the ceiling camera. Still angled slightly off-center. Still wrong. She stepped to the four-pole and rotated it 2 degrees, positioning the metal column directly within the camera's blind spot. Now the bed, the patient's torso, and her hands would all be partially obscured from that angle. She did it as if aligning equipment for convenience. Outside, the charge nurse watched closely now. Who authorized you to secure that room? She asked. Layla checked the patient's pulse manually. Time did. That is not a protocol. No, Layla said. It is not. Her fingers released the patient's wrist. Strong pulse. Warm skin. Stable. Good. A distant sound echoed faintly through the building. Not footsteps. Not voices. Metal. Impacting metal. Far away. But heavy. Several staff turned their heads toward the corridor instinctively. What was that? Someone whispered. Layla did not look up. She adjusted the blanket edge again. Smoothed it once. Then she spoke, voice steady, quiet, and unmistakably in command. From this moment forward, no one enters this room unless I say so. No one argued. Not because she outranked them. Because something in her certainty made rank feel temporarily irrelevant. At the nurse's station, the phone connected. Security, this is ICU. We need. The line went dead. The nurse stared at the receiver. I think it dropped. The distant metallic sound came again. Closer. Layla's eyes shifted to the door. Her breathing remained slow. Her posture unchanged. But inside her stillness, decisions were already aligning. Outside, the charge nurse asked quietly, "What's going on?" Layla answered without raising her voice. "They ran," she said. "A beat. They should not have run." The weight of that settled over the hallway. Because everyone there understood one thing. Men trained to face danger do not run from nothing. No one spoke for several seconds after she said it. The ICU was not designed for silence. It was built for managed noise, tones, pages, footsteps, clipped exchanges. When quiet arrived, it felt unnatural, like pressure in the ears before a storm. Layla stood beside the bed, eyes on the monitor, but her attention was elsewhere. Reconstruction. The mind did it automatically when trained long enough. Not imagination. Assembly. Pieces placed in order until they stopped contradicting each other. Armed escort. Unrecorded room access. Dead radio channel. Unverified footsteps. Coded transmission. Immediate flight. Not fear of something inside. Fear of something coming. Her gaze shifted once to the door seal indicator. Still amber. Good. Outside, the charge nurse lowered her voice. Security isn't answering. Layla nodded faintly, though she had expected that. Try internal extension 91, she said. The nurse hesitated. How do you know that's? It routes through maintenance switchboard if primary is down. A pause. The nurse dialed. Listened. Her eyes widened slightly. It's ringing. Layla adjusted the 4-pump rate again by a fraction. Not because it required adjustment. Because precision steadied observers. Behind the charge nurse, 2 orderlies had stopped pushing a supply cart. They watched the glass room as if it contained a weather system. One of them whispered, "Should we move the patient?" Layla answered immediately. No. The word was quiet. Absolute. The charge nurse covered the receiver. Why not? Because movement is exposure. Exposure to what? Layla did not answer that directly. Instead she asked, "How many exits from this unit?" The charge nurse blinked. 3. Wrong. The nurse frowned. No, it's 3 public. 1 service. 1 fire stair behind supply refrigeration. The charge nurse stared at her. How do you know that? Layla's eyes remained on the monitor. I read maps. The nurse did not reply. Because the alternative question, why would a float nurse study structural layouts, did not yet have a comfortable answer. On the phone, the younger nurse said, "Hello?" Yes. ICU. We need corridor verification. Armed detail abandoned post. She listened. Her expression changed. Maintenance says they didn't shut anything down, she said, lowering the receiver. The charge nurse frowned. Shut what down? The cameras. Every head turned instinctively toward the ceiling domes in the hallway. Layla spoke softly. They didn't. The charge nurse looked back at her. What? They didn't shut them down, Layla repeated. Someone redirected them. Silence. That's not possible, the charge nurse said. It is, Layla replied. If you have internal access. The weight of that settled differently than the earlier silence. Internal meant inside the building. Inside meant present. The distant metallic sound came again. Closer now. Not loud. But unmistakable. A forced impact. Something heavy striking a barrier not designed to be struck. One of the orderlies swallowed. That's not construction. No one corrected him. Layla reached beneath the bed and checked the portable oxygen cylinder gauge. Full. She secured the valve cap loosely, ready for immediate use but appearing untouched. Her movements remained unhurried. The charge nurse watched her carefully now. You keep preparing equipment, she said. For what? Layla answered with another question. When those guards left, did either of them check this patient's restraints? The nurse blinked. I don't know. They did not, Layla said. How can you be sure? Because if they had, Layla replied calmly, they would have tightened them. The implication lingered. Not hospital protocol. Transport protocol. Custody protocol. The charge nurse's voice lowered. Who is he? Layla looked at the patient's face for the first time since the guards ran. Not studying. Confirming. Then she said, someone people are willing to violate a hospital to reach. The younger nurse near the phone whispered, you think someone's coming here? Layla did not soften the truth. Yes. Another metallic impact echoed faintly. Closer still. The charge nurse straightened. We need to evacuate the unit. No. The refusal came instantly. That's standard procedure. It is, Layla agreed. And it is wrong for this situation. Why? Because evacuation creates corridors. The nurse hesitated. Corridors for what? For approach. The word landed like a weight. Layla adjusted the patient's blanket again, smoothing it along the same crease she had corrected twice already. A small act. Precise. Grounding. Outside, staff shifted uneasily. The charge nurse studied her. You're very certain for someone who doesn't know what's happening. Layla's eyes lifted to meet hers. I know enough. Another impact sounded. This time unmistakably from within the hospital structure. Not distant anymore. On the same floor. A tray rattled on a nearby counter. Someone inhaled sharply. Layla's voice remained steady. They are testing barriers. The orderly whispered, who is they? Layla did not answer immediately. She listened. Counted seconds between sounds. Measured distance by vibration delay through the floor. Calculated approach speed. Then she said quietly. Professionals. The word chilled the room more effectively than any alarm. Because everyone there understood the difference between chaos and trained intent. Layla turned slightly toward the door panel. Her reflection in the frosted glass looked calm. Almost detached. But her eyes had sharpened. The analysis phase was ending. Preparation time was over. Outside, the charge nurse asked, very quietly now. What do you need us to do? Layla answered without hesitation. Exactly what I say. No one argued. Not anymore. The next sound did not echo. It traveled. A low metallic reverberation rolled through the floor, up the bed frame, into the rail beneath Layla's hand. Not a strike this time. Sustained force. Something being pried. Levered. Tested for structural give. She felt it through her palm. Outside the glass, several staff heard it now too. Heads turned toward the far end of the corridor, where the ICU curved toward imaging. No one spoke. Layla counted the vibration length. 4 seconds. Pause. 3 seconds. Pause. Different tool. Different angle. They're mapping resistance, she said quietly. The charge nurse swallowed. Who is? Layla did not answer that. Instead she stepped to the wall panel and dimmed the hallway-facing display of the bedside monitor until its glow became barely visible through the frosted glass. Light discipline. The charge nurse noticed. Why are you doing that? Because light attracts direction. Another reverberation pulsed faintly through the floor. Closer. The younger nurse at the station whispered, "We need police." "We need containment," Layla corrected. She moved to the medication cart inside the room and opened the lower drawer. Vials. Saline. Gauze. Tape. Ordinary inventory. She shifted 3 items slightly, aligning them into a clear working row. Preparation without explanation. Outside, hurried footsteps approached from the main corridor. Hospital security at last, 2 officers in standard Navy uniforms, breathing slightly hard from speed. No rifles. No helmets. Just radios and duty belts. They stopped at the glass. "What's going on?" one asked. The charge nurse gestured toward Layla. She sealed the room. Armed escorts ran. "Something's happening downstairs." The officer frowned and stepped toward the door. "Ma'am, I need you to open this." Layla did not turn. "No." He blinked. "Hospital security." "I know." "Then unlock the door." "No." His jaw tightened. "You don't have authority to deny." "Yes," she said calmly, "I do." The certainty in her tone stalled him more effectively than resistance would have. "What authority?" he demanded. She checked the patient's 4-line for air again. "None." Then she answered, "Situational." "That's not a credential." "No," she agreed. "It is not." The second security officer leaned closer to the glass, trying to see past the opacity band. "Ma'am, we need to move that patient to a secure floor." "If you move him," Layla said, "you will mark his location in motion." "That's the point." "No," she said softly. "That is the vulnerability." Another metallic impact sounded. Much closer. This time it came with a faint shudder in the ceiling fixtures. The 2 security officers exchanged a glance. That sound did not belong in a hospital. The first officer lifted his radio. "Control, report disturbance level." "Static." He adjusted frequency. "Nothing." Layla spoke quietly. "Their communications are being suppressed locally." He looked at her sharply. "How would you know that?" "Because ours are too." The second officer tried his phone. No signal. He held it up, moving it slightly. Still nothing. A new tension entered his posture. "Jammer," he murmured. Layla did not confirm. But she did not deny it. The charge nurse whispered, "That's illegal." "Yes," Layla said. Another vibration rolled through the floor. Closer still. The first officer stepped nearer the door. "Listen carefully. We are evacuating this wing." "No." His patience thinned. "That's not your call. It is if evacuation creates a moving target. We can't leave staff exposed." "You won't," she said. "You will relocate them." He frowned. "That's what evacuation is." "No," Layla said. Evacuation is noise. Relocation is silence. The distinction hung between them. Behind the officers, more staff had gathered. No one spoke above a whisper now. The ICU had shifted from routine to alert without any official announcement. The second officer asked carefully, "What exactly do you think is coming?" Layla adjusted the patient's oxygen saturation probe. Not chaos, she said. Intent. Another impact. Very close. Somewhere beyond the ICU double doors. The charge nurse flinched. The first officer lowered his voice. If there's an active threat, protocol requires. Protocols assume time, Layla said. We do not have that. He studied her face. Calm. Steady. Not guessing. Assessing. What are you asking us to do? He said. Layla finally turned toward the door. Her eyes met his through the glass. Clear the corridor, she said. Remove all visible personnel. Lights to half. No running. No announcements. Anyone who panics becomes a signal. The officers hesitated. Not because they disagreed. Because they did not understand why they trusted her. Another metallic strike sounded. Right outside ICU perimeter walls. Decision time had arrived. The first officer nodded once to his partner. They turned and began quietly ushering staff away from the hallway, no shouting, no alarms, just firm gestures and low instructions. Within seconds, the corridor began to empty. Orderlies disappeared first. Then nurses. Then clerks. The charge nurse lingered. She looked back at the glass. Who are you? She asked softly. Layla's answer was simple. A nurse. Not false. Not complete. The charge nurse held her gaze another moment. Then she stepped away. The hallway lights dimmed to half power. Footsteps faded. Voices vanished. Silence returned. Inside the room, Layla listened. Measured distance. Measured timing. Measured intent. Another sound reached the door. Not metal this time. Footsteps. Slow. Controlled. Approaching. She rested her hand lightly on the bed rail again. Her pulse remained steady. Her breathing even. Her voice barely audible. Right on time, she said. The footsteps outside the ICU did not hurry. They advanced with the patience of people who expected success. Layla listened without moving. Each step landed evenly. No drag. No uncertainty. At least 2 individuals. Possibly 3. Their spacing suggested they were not searching. They knew where they were going. Behind her, the ventilator released another slow breath into the patient's lungs. Steady. Reliable. Unaware. Layla lowered her eyes to the monitor. Heart rhythm unchanged. Blood pressure stable. Sedation holding. Good. Because what came next required him exactly as he was. Outside, the corridor had emptied. The last staff member's shoes had faded into the distance 30 seconds ago. The dimmed lights left the hallway washed in a muted gray. No movement. No voices. Only the approaching steps. She pressed her thumb lightly against the patient's wrist again. Warm. Alive. A human life reduced, for the moment, to vital signs and risk calculations. She spoke softly, though he could not hear. I need you to stay asleep. Not a request. A promise she intended to keep. The footsteps stopped directly outside the ICU entrance. Silence followed. Then. A faint metallic tick. Not force. Contact. Someone testing the door. Layla's gaze shifted once toward the oxygen cylinder beneath the bed. Full tank. Heavy steel. Improvised barrier if needed. She nudged it 2 inches closer to the door with her foot. No sound. Her movements were exact enough to look accidental on camera. Outside, a gloved hand appeared briefly against the glass panel of the ICU entrance. Just a silhouette. Gone again. They were confirming interior visibility. She reached to the four-pole and loosened the wheel locks halfway. Not enough to roll. Enough to move instantly. Another faint sound outside. Fabric brushing wall. Positioning. Layla exhaled slowly through her nose. Inside her mind, a map unfolded, angles, lines of sight, timing windows. Not imagination. Memory. The kind built through repetition in places where hesitation cost lives. She spoke toward the door, voice level. You will not get what you came for. No answer. But the silence outside sharpened. They had heard her. Good. Now they knew the room was not empty. The charge nurse's earlier question returned to her, not as sound, but as weight. Who are you? She did not allow herself to answer it. Identity was irrelevant. Outcome was not. The patient's monitor beeped softly as his blood pressure shifted by 2 points. She adjusted the infusion rate by a decimal. Numbers returned to baseline. Quiet competence. Control inside the only space she could control. Another sound at the ICU entrance. A soft electronic chirp. Not hospital equipment. Access device. They were testing the lock. Layla stepped closer to the wall panel and pressed a recessed button beneath the standard controls. The door seal indicator changed from amber to red. Full isolation. Not in any hospital protocol manual. The system allowed it only for fire containment. Or contamination lockdown. Outside, a pause. Then a low voice, muffled through glass. Calm. Professional. Open the door. Layla did not respond. The voice tried again. You're not part of this. She adjusted the patient's blanket edge. You're wrong, she said quietly. Silence. Then the handle shifted slightly. Pressure tested. They were confirming reinforcement strength. The voice spoke once more, still calm. If you keep that door closed, people outside this unit get hurt. There it was. Leverage. Not shouted. Not threatened. Stated. Layla's eyes lowered to the patient's hand. Unconscious. Defenseless. Valuable enough that trained men had fled rather than remain near him. She measured the statement carefully. Not emotionally. Structurally. Was it credible? Possible. Was it immediate? Unlikely. Professionals did not damage leverage assets prematurely. Still. Risk existed. The moral equation formed cleanly. Open the door, threat reaches patient. Keep it closed, threat may target others. Her jaw tightened slightly. Not fear. Cost. She reached down and adjusted the patient's pulse oximeter again, though it did not need adjustment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. You are not here for them. A pause outside. The voice did not reply. Because the silence itself was confirmation. She continued, tone unchanged. You are here for him. Still no response. She looked toward the door. Her reflection stared back faintly in the frosted glass. If you harm anyone else, she said softly, you lose your reason to be here. The hallway remained silent. But the pressure on the door handle stopped. A decision had been made on the other side. She felt it. The threat had recalculated. Good. She rested her hand lightly on the bed rail again. Inside her chest, her heart beat once. Slow. Measured. Controlled. Not adrenaline. Discipline. Outside the door, footsteps shifted position. Not retreating. Reforming. Preparing. Layla watched the monitor. Waited. And accepted, without resistance, the quiet truth settling over the room. From this point forward, every outcome would cost something. The hallway outside the ICU door had gone completely still. Not empty. Occupied. Layla could feel it in the air pressure against the glass. Presence had weight. Trained presence had intention. Whoever stood outside was no longer testing. They were deciding. She watched the heart monitor. 72 beats per minute. Regular. Unafraid. She matched her breathing to it. Inhale. Exhale. Outside, a soft scrape touched the lower edge of the door. Metal against composite. Not striking. Positioning. She spoke quietly, almost conversational. You won't breach it fast enough. No answer. But the sound stopped. They were listening again. Good. Listening slowed people. Slower people made mistakes. Her eyes shifted to the oxygen flow regulator on the wall. She adjusted it by a fraction. Not enough to change the patient's intake. Enough to alter the ambient hiss in the room. White noise. Soft. Consistent. Masking smaller sounds. She stepped to the light control and dimmed the interior another degree. The monitors compensated automatically, brightening their displays. From outside, the room now looked darker than it actually was. Shapes distorted. Depth perception weakened. Environmental control. Outside, a whisper of fabric moved again. Someone repositioning to the side of the doorframe. Flanking angle. She spoke toward the glass. If you break the seal, negative pressure equalizes. Airflow shifts outward. Silence. She continued, calm as instruction. That means trace dispersal. A pause. Then the low voice returned. What trace? She did not answer. She let the question sit. Let them imagine. Imagination was more persuasive than facts. Seconds passed. No movement. The man outside said, "Quieter now, you're bluffing." Layla tilted her head slightly. "No," she said. She rested her hand lightly on the bed rail. The same place she had placed it since the beginning. Anchor point. "If I were bluffing," she added, "you would already be inside." Silence again. Longer this time. She watched the reflection in the glass carefully. A shadow shifted. Weight transferred backward. Not retreat. Recalculation. Good. She reached to the four-pole and loosened the brake completely. Still did not move it. Prepared motion was more valuable than motion itself. Outside, a second voice murmured, too low to distinguish words. The first voice answered in the same tone. Team communication. Structured. Disciplined. Not improvising. Professionals. Layla closed her eyes for half a second. Not fatigue. Timing. She counted silently. 1. 2. 3. At 4, she pressed a hidden toggle beside the wall panel. In the hallway, the overhead lights flickered once. Then cut out. Darkness flooded the corridor beyond the glass. Emergency strips along the floor activated instantly, casting upward illumination that distorted angles and erased depth cues. Anyone standing upright became a silhouette without detail. Anyone crouching disappeared into shadow. Inside the room, nothing changed. She had not touched her lighting. She spoke into the darkness beyond the door. Your eyes will take 12 seconds to adjust. No response. Mine already have. At second 8, she rolled the four-pole 3 inches. The wheels whispered. Inside the room, the sound vanished into the oxygen hiss. Outside, it sounded like movement from the opposite corner. A silhouette shifted. Weight turned. Attention redirected. At second 12, she spoke again. You chose the wrong room. Silence. Then. Footsteps. Not forward. Back. One step. Then another. Measured. Controlled. Withdrawal, not retreat. The silhouettes thinned. One remained. The voice returned one last time. You're protecting the wrong person. Layla answered without hesitation. No, she said quietly. I'm protecting the right moment. The figure stood still for a final second. Then turned. Footsteps receded down the dark corridor. Not hurried. Not defeated. Finished. Layla did not move. She kept her hand on the rail. Kept her eyes on the glass. Counted. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Only when the distant sound of movement fully disappeared did she reach to the wall panel. And restore the hallway lights. They came back slowly. Empty corridor. No figures. No shadows. No threat. Just polished tile and silence. Behind her, the ventilator exhaled again. Steady. Alive. Layla adjusted the blanket edge once more. Smooth. Precise. Her pulse never changed. The ICU lights had been back on for 3 minutes when the first official footsteps arrived. Not hurried. Measured. Authority returning after uncertainty had passed. Layla heard them before anyone else did. Leather soles, not rubber. Multiple people. Coordinated pace. She did not look toward the door. She adjusted the patient's chart instead, writing a final notation in small, precise handwriting. Vitals stable. No incident recorded. Outside, voices murmured. Then stopped. A man appeared beyond the glass, dark suit, federal posture, eyes that assessed rooms the way surgeons assessed scans. 2 others stood behind him, one holding a tablet, the other scanning the corridor. The suited man looked through the frosted band. Open the door, he said. Layla finished her line of text. Dotted the final letter. Set the pen down. Then she walked to the panel and pressed the release. The indicator shifted from red to green. The door unlocked with a soft click. She stepped back. The man entered slowly, gaze moving once across the room before settling on the patient. He checked the restraints. The 4. The monitor. Each detail received exactly 1 second of attention. Satisfied. Only then did he look at her. You maintained custody, he said. Not praise. Verification. Yes. Alone? Yes. He studied her face as if searching for something familiar that refused to surface. Behind him, the tablet officer asked, any breach? No. Contact? Yes. The suited man's eyes sharpened slightly. Describe. Layla adjusted the blanket edge. Unnecessary, she said. A pause. He considered that. Then he nodded once. Accepted. Outside, the charge nurse hovered near the station, watching. 2 security officers stood beside her, speaking quietly into restored radios. Their posture had changed now, straighter, more formal. As if someone important had entered the building. The suited man glanced once more at the patient. Then back to Layla. What's your name? She picked up the chart. Documented. Not evasive. Accurate. He held her gaze another second. Then inclined his head slightly. Respect. He turned and stepped out of the room. His team followed. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. Because the moment for questions had already passed. Layla removed her gloves. Disposed of them. Sanitized her hands. Routine. She checked the monitor one last time. 74. Stable. Good. She picked up her bag from the corner chair. Opened the door. Stepped into the hallway. Staff watched her pass, uncertain why they were watching. The charge nurse opened her mouth as if to speak. But didn't. Layla walked to the time clock. Pressed out. The machine beeped once. Shift complete. Behind her, the suited man stood at the nurse's station reviewing a file the tablet officer had handed him. His eyes moved across the screen. Stopped. Returned to the top. His posture straightened slightly. He read the line again. Then he looked up. But she was already halfway down the corridor. Just a float nurse leaving after shift. The tablet officer asked quietly, "Sir?" The man locked the screen. "Nothing," he said. He handed it back. But his gaze lingered down the hallway where she had disappeared. On the dark screen, for a fraction of a second before it slept, her name had been visible beside a classification header. One not issued by any hospital. The ventilator inside room 7 exhaled softly. Steady. Uninterrupted. And by morning, no one on staff could quite explain why the most dangerous moment of their careers had felt, somehow, completely under control.